So the murder of Charlie Kirk right in front of his family and thousands of students for the heinous crime of debating with students, has a lot of people saying that this changes everything. Now, this is not the first time somebody has been murdered for their values. It's not the first time somebody has been murdered for both either their faith or their political positions. But I agree. I agree that this does change everything. This is going to change the way that we see things going forward. But one of the things I've noticed is a lot of people talking about this changes everything haven't gone into a great deal about why it changes everything and what exactly has changed. And if we don't get answers to those two questions, why and what, then we're going to come up with a lot of solutions that don't make sense. And in fact, we're seeing a lot of solutions offered as to what happens next that don't make a lot of sense, because you can kind of tell who has properly diagnosed this and who hasn't. So today, what we're going to discuss is why Charlie's murder does change everything. And we're going to specifically talk about what has changed. And we're going to look at this from the perspective of the left. We're going to look at it from the perspective of the right. And we're also going to look at it from the perspective of people that don't fall neatly into either of those categories. And we're going to analyze all of that. And hopefully we're going to be able to come to some good conclusions, because without proper analysis, we can't effectively talk about what happens next, because I'll tell you this much: it cannot continue the way it has before. All of that coming up on this episode of Making the Argument. I'm your host, Nick Freitas. With me in the studio, my beautiful bride, Tina, Queen of the Bees.
Hello, everyone.
And then, of course, we have our political prognosticator, resident historian, the Oracle of Virginia, Christian Hines. How are you, sir?
All things considered, could be worse.
Yeah. No, it has been a rough week. I know, when I was on Charlie's show on TBN, that was one of the things I had to admit is look, everybody is trying to do this kind of okay, let's pull together. I'm like, look, I'm just going to be honest with everybody. My mind's gone to some pretty dark places over the last couple of days. And I know it can't remain there, right? That was one of the things I wanted to address. I know it can't remain there. But I think we also have to be honest about what we're feeling about this, what we're thinking about this, so we can get to what happens next. So first things first, we're gonna frame this up. So what are we talking about today? Well, when we say that this changes everything, I think one of the first things that we have to address is, do we want the same things? Right? When you look at the political spectrum within the United States, when you look at how American citizens are analyzing not just what happened to Charlie, but what we want as a country. What do we think about our past? What do we think about our present? Where do we want to go in the future? What sort of policies do we want to have? When we look at the major political movements within the country, we have to ask an honest question, and that is, do they want the same things, or do they at least want enough of the same things to be able to peacefully coexist with one another? Which is to say that, you might think there should be a 10% tax rate. I might think it should be less than that. We could probably live in peace with one another, even though we disagree about some of those things. But is that really where we're at anymore? So we're going to talk about what do the different political movements really want, and can those things peacefully coexist? Because I've had some comments on this that generated a backlash from the Speaker of the House here in Virginia, as well as some of my other colleagues in the House of Delegates, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. The other thing that we're going to be talking about is this idea of, is this just fellow countrymen having a serious disagreement, or is something else taking place now? Or are we really breaking ourselves down now into friends and enemies? Because that is a departure, right? I would say there's obviously been times in American history where people have made those kinds of distinctions, but are we in the process of now doing that again? And if so, what does that look like, and how do we properly identify it? The other thing that we're going to be addressing is this whole idea of political violence and the glorification of political violence. This was something that tragically and ironically, Charlie Kirk had actually been speaking about. He had identified things that he thought were signifying that we were going to see an uptick in political violence. And that's one of the things that we want to address, is what causes political violence, and are we going to see more of it before we see less of it. And then the last thing that we're going to really address from these various perspectives that we're going to look at is this whole idea of critical mass within a movement. Now, I don't care where you are on the political spectrum, everybody has extremes, right? Everybody on the right, on the left, wherever, libertarian, everybody has extremes that don't necessarily represent what we might call the mainstream within a particular political movement. That's not to say that they don't play an important role. Samuel Adams himself said that it's not majorities that generally achieve the wide sweeping political change. It's usually very, very motivated and effective minorities within those particular groups. And we see that dating all the way back to the American Revolution. So the question is not whether or not a majority of people within a political movement believe something. It's whether or not you have a critical mass within a political movement that believes something. And then you have to start asking the question of, what do they want, right? Do they see their opponents as friends that they have a disagreement with or enemies? And do they glorify political violence? Because when you have a critical mass of that within a political movement, bad things are probably going to happen. So these are the categories that we're going to be talking about today. Before we get into that, we need to say thank you to one of our best sponsors ever, Good Ranchers. Good Ranchers has the guts to actually sponsor shows like this where we're talking about controversial issues. And we love Good Ranchers, not just because Ben and Corley Spell are excellent and wonderful people and they run an incredible business. We also love them because they produce an excellent product. This is one of the things that we've always kind of committed to our audience is that if we're going to recommend something to you, it's going to need to be something that we actually believe in. And we absolutely believe in Good Ranchers. We use Good Ranchers all the time. They have a really, really special deal going. If you go to goodranchers.com, you use my code Nick, right? Not only are you going to get $40 off your order, but you're also going to get free meat with your subscription. So what could be better than getting your steak, your pork, your poultry, your bacon, your wild-caught seafood sent directly to your door, $40 off your order, plus they're going to throw in free meat on top of that, which again, you get some choices there. You get to choose what sort of free add-ons you want to your subscription. Like I said, Tina and I have been using it for a long time now. We absolutely love it.
We just had the Wagyu burgers last night.
We just had the Wagyu burgers last night.
They're so good.
Good Ranchers is that perfect intersection that we're looking for. They're the people that share values, but they don't try to just trade exclusively on their values. They realize that if they're going to say that they believe these things and they're people of faith, they're patriots, but if they're going to say that those things, well, then they better produce a superior product. And I am telling you, they do. So go to goodranchers.com, use my code Nick, get that $40 off. Sign up for one of those subscriptions. You are not going to regret it. Okay, now that we've framed up this argument, we've framed up these categories that we're going to discuss. Now we're going to look at the various perspectives. And the first perspective that we're going to look at is the left. And how does the left see what's going on within politics? What does the left actually want? How do they see us? Do they see those? I mean, because obviously we're not of the left. Do they see us as friends that they disagree with, or do they see us as enemies? How do they feel about political violence, and what sort of critical mass within the left actually believes these things? So I think we got our first one right here, and this is we got a post on X from Kevin Bass, and it says 1/3 of young liberals believe it is justified to resort to violence to achieve political goals. And what's interesting about this graph is it shows people that describe as liberals, conservatives, and moderates. And interestingly enough, you have three brackets: aged 18 to 39, 40 to 59, and 60 plus. And the liberals, the lowest one. So first of all, liberals across the board are more comfortable with political violence than moderates and conservatives at all ages. At all ages, self-identified liberals are more comfortable with political violence to achieve political goals. Now, when you do 60 plus, it's pretty low across the board. So everyone's under 10%. Liberals are the highest, then conservatives, then moderates. When you drop to the 40 and 59, it jumps up quite a bit. It's about 15% of liberals believe that political violence is sometimes necessary, about 8% of conservatives, and about 7% of moderates. But then when you get 18 to 39, that's where you see a massive shift. So conservatives, self-identifying conservatives age 18 to 39, about 5% say it is justified for citizens to resort to violence in order to achieve political goals, that it's sometimes justified. Moderates are 11 to 12%.
Which questions whether they're moderate or not.
Well, and liberals are at about 29 to 30%. 29 to 30%. So there's no question that when you look at young liberals, so we're looking at the people that Tyler Robinson, the man that murdered Charlie Kirk, would fall into, or the man who's accused of murdering Charlie Kirk, would fall into this category. A lot of your college age students, your younger adults, they would fall into this category of being far more comfortable with political violence than even their parents or their grandparents.
I mean, I look at this and it's eye-opening. I mean, I felt like this when I was in college because there's so many other surveys and polls.
Yeah.
I don't have it up, but there's so many other surveys and polls that show that liberals, especially younger liberals, are overwhelmingly more likely to cut off friends and family over political disagreements than conservatives and moderates. Conservatives, it's like a tiny minority that say, I can't be friends with you because of your politics. But liberals, especially younger ones, it's like consistently like over 50%.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean that every single one of them are going to resort to violence, but there's a strong overlap. And when I saw those type of polls, and we've seen data on that for years now, it's not surprising when you look at that to then conclude and then see it in the data that a portion of those same people are also willing to cheer or in some cases themselves resort to political violence to achieve the type of world that they want to live in.
Well, and I think it's important because again, we're talking about this from the perspective of the left. And again, this is where they're at. Younger self-described liberals believe that yes. Now again, the way this question is worded is it ever justified for citizens to resort to violence in order to achieve political goals? I think that's a poorly worded question, to be honest. But here's the difference in what you see, right? Conservatives and moderates kind of keyed into the fact that it's like, okay, we're not asking about was the American Revolution justified. We're really asking about more isolated acts of violence, rioting, burning stuff down, things of that nature, which theoretically could also include political assassinations. Is that justified? And what it shows you here is that from the left's perspective, they are far more open to this. The younger the liberal, the far more open they are to this idea that, well, yes, it would be justified. And I think to some degree you have to accept that is a moral framework speaking, right? This is not just incensed rhetoric. This is not, or heightened rhetoric or inflammatory rhetoric. This is a moral framework because typically speaking, when we look at violence, we look at it as physical violence within what we might call a civilized society is typically seen as the last resort to something, right? Physical violence is meant to be avoided. And you're seeing now that there's a significantly higher degree of comfort with using some sort of physical violence in order to achieve it. And what's the next thing that we have?
The next link that we've got is a warning from Charlie Kirk from several months ago.
Yeah.
Talking about what's going on within the left. And he was quite tuned into this considering the work that he did. I want to read this off because he posted this back in April. He said, assassination culture is spreading on the left. 48% of liberals say it would at least be somewhat justified to murder Elon Musk. 55% said the same about Donald Trump. In California, activists are naming ballot measures after Luigi Mangione. Context there real quick. Luigi Mangione was the guy who committed the assassination of a CEO of a healthcare company back in December, and he's now kind of considered almost like a martyr. He's alive. He's in custody. He's being charged with murder, of course, but he's being praised by the left, and that's what Charlie Kirk was getting at here. He continued with this tweet and said, the left is being whipped into a violent frenzy. Any setback, whether losing an election or losing a court case, justifies a maximally violent response. This is the natural outgrowth of left-wing protest culture tolerating violence and mayhem for years on end. The cowardice of local prosecutors and school officials have turned the left into a ticking time bomb, and we know how that ended, unfortunately.
Well, and this goes into two things with respect to the moral framework on the left, right? It's the glorification of somebody that murdered the CEO of a healthcare company. Now, maybe you hate that healthcare company. Maybe you've got massive problems with healthcare within the United States, which I could understand both from a personal level and also from just a structural level. But this goes into the difference between when we look at those two categories that we discussed before in the framing of this of, do I see these people as friends or fellow citizens or fellow human beings that I have a disagree with, or do I see it as my enemy? This is enemy culture. The other thing that you see is this idea of the glorification of political violence. When you have this many people saying that it is at least somewhat justified that it is a majority of respondents said is it at least somewhat justified to murder Donald Trump. Okay, this goes into that fourth question, right? Is there a critical mass?
A majority, by definition, has to be.
A majority is a mass, right? A majority is a critical mass within a political movement. If you have a majority of people saying that it is okay, let me put it this way. It would horrify me if one of my friends had said, no, I'm dead serious. I think it would be morally justifiable to murder Joe Biden. If somebody had said that, I would have been like, yeah, you and I do not have the same worldview at all. Because ultimately what that means, because my moral framework says that, well, no, murder is not justified, right? Even if I really don't like the person or if I really, really despise their policies, murder is not justified. Now, there's a big distinction between war, right? There's a distinction between self-defense. And so the question becomes, how do you get this moral framework to where a majority of respondents say, well, yeah, if Donald Trump was murdered, I could justify that. I could morally justify that. And again, that's not just rhetoric. That's the reshaping of a moral framework.
And we've seen that not just on the political side with political figures, but we've also seen there are some Native American activists who make it sound like if somebody comes in and murders your whole family to take their land back for their ancestors, you had it coming and that's justified. So they're expanding what could be justified and what couldn't be justified. Because most of us, I think, if you walked in and somebody had done something horrible to your child, most people would say that person had whatever was coming to them from at the hand of the Father. Most people would see that as basically on
some level understandable, right?
An understandable sort of heat of the moment, temporary insanity kind of, I saw something horrible, I reacted. Most people would see that. And I think that what we're seeing is a shift to expand that and expand what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, which is why we get certain things like the young lady who was murdered on the train and a movement of people who did a fundraiser for the bail for the guy who killed her.
Who murdered her.
Because she was of a member of a classification of people that they saw as an oppressor class, they decided, let's go ahead and help this poor man who all he did was get up and stab this girl to death.
He was failed by the system, and so therefore he's not completely to blame for his actions.
Yeah.
And
she was of the correct category of people that we're allowed to show that aggression.
Let's just be honest. It's she was white. I mean, there's a lot of people when they're talking about the left's perspective on this, it's, this is all Marxism. To a degree, that's correct. It's a lot of this is cultural Marxism. I'm not denying that. But there's something to be said about there's this strain within the left that's just straight up, we just hate whites. There's also this strain within the left that's we hate men.
Yeah.
And there's especially this strain within the left, which is we hate Western civilization.
Well, so somebody brought this up, and I think it was a good point. They're like, well, technically Marxism is Western civilization in the sense that it came from the West. And I get what they're saying by that. When we're talking about Western civilization, I think we're referring more to that which actually won.
We
what
need
we thought was
classical notions of Western
what we thought was
civilization.
the existential struggle between, fascism, communism, and what we might call, liberal democracy or free market economics or things of that nature, right? The idea of property rights and individual liberty and representative government, like these things have all become somewhat synonymous with Western civilization when we speak of it. There's no doubt that Marxism seeks to destroy that.
When at least when I'm talking about Western civilization, I'm referring to twofold combination. I can't separate the two of the Greco-Roman philosophical tradition with Christianity.
Yeah.
It's the fusion of those two things put together that, from my perspective, and I don't think that I'm alone in that. I know that a lot of other people would maybe throw in the Enlightenment. I'm not a big fan of the Enlightenment, but I know that some people would do that. And that's where you get the liberal component from. But you're right that like Marxism, geographically, right, it comes out of the UK, right? Marx is, living in Europe, but there is this explicit attack on Western civilization as through that oppressor dynamic. And from the left's perspective, like you were talking about this return of the friend-enemy distinction, and we haven't really seen that in the U.S. since really the Civil War, right?
And even then, it's not like it is now.
I mean, we were lining each other up in Gettysburg for 3 days, shooting at each other.
Yeah, but that speaks to the elevation of violence that was taking place. But if you actually looked at the differences in worldview in the Civil War and the differences in worldview now, I would argue that there's something fundamentally different in it. Like when you look at
more partisan now and more guerrilla based and lone wolf based.
That's not even what I'm talking about. That's about tactics and strategy. What I'm talking about is our interpretation of the world. There was a couple of major questions that were at play within the Civil War. One of them was obviously slavery. It was how do we look at our fellow men that may be of a different ethnicity, right? And should slavery exist as a category? That was a significant difference in opinions between the two warring sides. But there was also implications with respect to what was the states, what were considered states' rights, or what were the states' authorities and responsibilities in reference to the federal government. And if you look at that, that was a fundamental question that was being asked with respect to the whole organization of the United States and the federal government in the first place, right? But everyone understood the nature of that question, right? So I think what's happening here is a little bit, it is actually fundamentally different in certain ways that are unique to what's going on right now.
I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
So when I said a second ago that you were bringing up the return of the friend-enemy distinction, I was actually going to draw a distinction between the way that it was applied in the Civil War versus today. In the Civil War, both sides, I mean, that's by definition, both sides recognize each other as the enemy.
Yes.
It was obviously, right? But when you look at it today, in a way, yes, the left is obviously applying the friend-enemy distinction, but in a way, the left doesn't really recognize that it has enemies. It recognizes that it has pathologies to eradicate. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't really grant moral legitimacy to its enemy because it denies that it can even have enemies. What it says is we have problems that need to be eradicated. We have racism, white supremacy, sexism, transphobia, Islamophobia, fascism, threats to our democracy. These aren't things to negotiate with. These aren't even things to fight out in the sense of the traditional rules of warfare. Mm-hmm. In the sense of the Civil War, both sides recognize each other as enemies, right? They took prisoners of war. They fought within, I mean, obviously there were still...
Yeah, they fought within certain boundaries.
They fought within certain boundaries.
And,
That in a way, that's like a recognition of a very formal enemy in the same way that like the Romans and Persians were enemies for 700 years, right? But when the left looks at its enemies today, it says, no, I don't grant you moral legitimacy. Mm-hmm. Say whatever you want. The Union did not execute every prisoner of war that they took for the Confederacy. Yeah. They recognized that there was... It's not that they recognized the claims of the Confederacy as being morally legitimate, but they certainly recognized the humanity in the individuals that they were fighting. Mm-hmm. Like Grant famously was very lenient to Lee at Appomattox. The left doesn't look at it that way because I don't think that they really view their enemies as being, they don't view their enemies as really being worthy of humanity. They view them as intrinsically evil.
Well, we talked about
oppressive.
this. We talked about this I mentioned this once before when I said I found myself in enough conversations now where I think I can articulate what I see going on, and that is when I debate with somebody of the left, especially someone that identifies as more of like what we might call the woke left. I'm trying to debate, and they're trying to diagnose. So I'm trying to say like, okay, here's my position. This is why I believe it. This is the data that I use in order to come to these conclusions. This is the logical framework that I use. And their response is usually diagnosing me as something. Oh, well, you're a bigot. Oh, well, then you're a xenophobe. Oh, well, then you're an Islamophobe. Oh, well, then you're a transphobe. And it's like, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I respond with to say, well, no, I'm not a racist because I don't fit the definition of what racism is. They simply adjust the definition of racism to mean what they need it to mean in that particular situation in order to disregard my argument.
Racism means enemy of progressivism.
Yes, and a lot of things seem to be have now fallen into this category where it has become, with certain people, impossible to explain a different perspective that they don't then automatically diagnose as being categorically evil. Because if we can agree that bigotry, racism, sexism, right, in the actual meaning of those words, not the malleable, are evil things, right? You should not denigrate someone because of their sex. You should not denigrate someone because of their race, right? You should not have an irrational hatred for someone. If we can categorize those things as evil, well, then the moment they're saying this is who you are, well, then now you're evil.
And what can you do to evil? You don't negotiate with it. No. You fight it. You defeat it. You destroy it. Like one side has claimed a set of universal principles completely divorced of transcendence.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually incredibly dangerous when you take a universal set of principles divorced of a religious framework like Christianity, because then you can say anybody that doesn't adopt those principles is evil.
Yeah.
Because these are supposed to be universal principles that should be applied everywhere. So therefore, anybody that rejects the universal principles is rejecting the good.
Yeah.
Granted, it's their twisted version of the good divorced from transcendent good.
But that creates the moral framework.
Guess what that's done? You've now created the circumstances where you can initiate violence against them and claim to be committing it in an act of self-defense.
Yes.
And simultaneously, you can claim to be the victim the entire time.
Yes.
It's the whole, you're crying out in pain as you're striking your opponent type of situation.
Well,
they can literally try to kill you and claim to be the victim at the same time.
Yes. Well, and this is, so I did a tweet that I had in 2023 where, and I was talking specifically about the transgender argument. And I was like, it used to be that when the left called you a sexist or a racist, it was because they were trying to shame you into silence. It was a way of shutting down debate. Is if I can discredit you, if I can discredit your argument by discrediting you, right, a form of ad hominem attack, well, then now no one listens to you and I get what I want. All right, so it was a form of I'm silencing you or I'm diminishing you within the public space. I said something different is going on now whenever they start saying, well, your speech is violence, or when you say that I don't believe that transgenderism exists as an actual category, I believe it's a mental illness, not a person. They said, well, then now you're engaging in transgenocide. That's where I started to say they're not using these terms to silence you. They're using these terms so that when they attack you, and I don't mean verbally, when they use physical violence against you, they can come back and say, I was just defending myself from genocide. That's what they're doing. 2023. And we see it now. I said that is the creation of a moral framework. As soon as it became what you believe is bad to what you believe and what you say is tantamount to violence, it's like, oh, I know what's happening next. I know what's happening next. You're going to engage in aggressive violence and claim that it was justifiable. Now, to illustrate this, I think we have a clip of kind of the Charlie Kirk got what he deserved thing from the left.
Yeah, listen to this. This is a great compilation.
Inscriptions on the 3 unfired casings read, "Hey fascist!" ! Catch! !
Do you think Donald Trump is a fascist?
Yes, I do.
No one has ever been more dangerous to this country than Donald Trump, and he is a fascist to his core.
And shut down the Senate! We are at war! We're in a war right now.
We are at war.
So you have to be willing to do whatever is necessary in order to save the country.
And that's why the gloves are off.
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
And yes, there are many threats to democracy. We see it with these extreme candidates.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country, and maybe there will be.
But you can only push people so far. And then they start to take matters into their own hands.
What the American public want is for us to bring actual weapons to this bar fight. This is an actual fight.
You know, this is literally call to arms.
The MAGA movement is a threat.
Michelle says that, when they go low, we go high.
No. With all due respect, if they go low, we don't go high.
When they go low, we kick them.
We take them to the mud and choke them out.
And make sure that they stay down. And you know what? Kick them when they're down because they deserve it.
Get up in the face of some Congress people.
We are going to be in your face. We are going to be on your...
We have to fight this in the streets.
We're going to fight it in the streets. It's time to step out of your comfort zone and step out into the streets.
To our Republican colleagues, if you do not see the light, we will bring the fire. Resist! You and your little friend off of Twitter. Y'all about to find out.
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
He's not going to have a third term. He may not finish this term.
Yes, the last few days you woke up thinking there might be news. Just saying. Just saying. There will be news sometime. Just so you know, there will be news.
Okay, so every single one of those people was not some fringe person in their mother's basement. These were the leading voices within the Democratic Party. These were their elected leaders to run for president. These were senators. These were governors. This was the current House leadership.
One of them is running for governor right here in Virginia this year.
Yeah, Abigail Spanberger running for governor this year in Virginia. So again, let's go back to the questions, right? Do we want the same thing? Obviously not. Is there this return of friend versus enemy as opposed to citizens civilly debating things? Obviously. Is there a glorification of political violence? Obviously. Is there a critical mass on the left which now buys this? Obviously. Abigail Spanberger is constantly held up as this is the moderate version of the Democratic Party. She's a moderate. She was in that clip. And so this is the part where, again, when we look at this, and I tweet out, this is no longer a civil discussion among fellow countrymen. This is a war between diametrically opposed worldviews. And Dan Helmer and Don Scott and, Candy King, I can't believe I'm not at war with anybody. How dare he say this? This is horrible.
They're all liars.
Really?
They're
minutes
all
ago, you
liars.
were calling us all fascists, bigots.
Every single one of those people, and more, especially people like Helmer, have built an entire career around demonizing their political opponents, stripping them of moral legitimacy, and teeing up stuff like this.
So look, we're gonna get to. I want to get to more of this because we're gonna go some of this stuff, but I think it's worthwhile to point out that this idea that this is not a common belief on the left or something that has not been carefully organized, crafted, and pushed out on the mainstream is a joke.
The problem is that they were totally fine with it as long as we didn't recognize it and act accordingly. And now I think we started recognizing it, but I think most people finally
Charlie's death.
Well, wait a second. We're getting ahead of ourselves. All right. Because everything we've talked about before, here's what's important to understand. Everything we've talked about so far on the perspective of the left was before Charlie's death. This is before.
Right.
Okay. This is before Charlie's death.
So surely they've changed, right?
This is why I'm saying there's been a groundwork. And now we had Charlie's death. Okay. So how did the left react to Charlie's death? Because clearly these people that assure me that this is not a battle between diametrically opposed worldviews, Surely the people that have told me, Nick, your rhetoric is incendiary and inflammatory, and I don't have enemies, and I like you, and we're fellow country. Surely the response to Charlie Kirk's death was something that we can point to and say, oh, you know what? Nick was wrong. Nick was wrong. The left saw this and realized, wow, this is a pivotal moment, and it's an opportunity for the left to come forward and say, hey, let's tone down the rhetoric, right? And let's just commiserate with a woman and her children that just lost a husband and a father, right? That's what happened. Oh, wait, nope, that's not what happened. Destiny, Steve Bonnell, said, this Charlie Kirk memorial is indistinguishable from a Nazi rally, and F anyone who wants to pretend it's not. Let's look at the next one. Let's look at another one here. This is from Ilhan Omar says, Charlie Kirk should be left, his legacy should be left in the dustbin of history. She echoed the assassin's words, claiming that he spread hate. She refused to apologize for sharing a video that called him Dr. Frankenstein and said his monster shot him through the neck. Because remember, and Speaker Don Scott spread this lie as well, was this idea that, oh, he got shot by his own side. I mean, no sooner had the shots rang out than you had people on MSNBC saying, well, we don't know if this was somebody, this was a fan of Charlie Kirk shooting celebratory, and it just happened to hit him. Like
we're a bunch of morons, you know?
Yeah. We're not the ones that don't understand how guns work, right? And then you had people like, Dowd getting right there on MSNBC going, basically, well, this is just what happens. This is what Charlie Kirk spread hate, and he spread this, and now he's been killed by it. Right? Let's look at another one.
You were hinting at this just a second ago.
Yeah, only 10%. Wait, scroll up here real quick. I'm going to read this. All right. Only 10% of Democrats are aware that Charlie Kirk's killer was left-wing. Right? Only 10%. Only 10% is aware. 68% of Republicans know he was left-wing. 32% of independents. Only 10% of Democrats. 37% of U.S. adult citizens know that he had left-wing beliefs.
A plurality. But 3 times as many Democrats think he was right-wing than think he was left-wing. By the way...
Well, that 16% that believes that something other than his political beliefs were at play are probably the people that recognize this is trans violence. This is yet again trans violence. But people don't seem to recognize that largely occurs on the left, that the trans issue largely occurs on the left.
So you know what's even more disturbing?
Yeah.
Now that enough news has come out to, pretty
it is definitive at this point. If you were denying that this guy because their claim initially was it was MAGA that shot him, and they were basing that off of what his parents apparently believed. But then again, he went off to college, right? And so he goes off to college. He's living with a man who is going through the process of transitioning, which again, you can't transition into a woman. You can simply start removing pieces of your own anatomy, but it doesn't make you a woman. So this man is in a homosexual relationship, right, with somebody who's identifying as trans, and he's in a Discord chats talking about what he's doing, why he's doing it. He's etching things into bullets, which absolutely fascist, catch. There's just at this point, if you are willing to believe that he was actually secretly right wing, I don't know how to have a rational conversation with you.
It was a total lie that came out of nowhere, where they were trying to be like, oh, well, he shot Charlie because he didn't think Charlie was right wing enough.
Yeah,
and he's right, like it was a total lie. There was no evidence for this at all. And
his parents were more on the right.
But his classmates said that he was extremely left-wing and said that he was associating with very left-wing people. It was
his mother talked about him clashing with his father more and more in the past couple of years, and how his views had become very left-wing, and that there had been a lot of heated discussions as a family.
So the lie that the mainstream media, the lie that elected Democrats like Don Scott tried to push, that this was MAGA, and Don Scott had to change his tweet because, of course, he was lecturing us because remember, they're always the victims. But here's what's amazing: as soon as they bring up that Blue Sky tweet,
Yeah.
What's interesting is that
there's
on
a
Blue
few of them.
Okay, go up to the one where it actually explains what's going on. That's too small to read. What ends up happening is you have people on Blue Sky going, anyway, probably for the best if everyone asserts that he's a groyper, whether he is or not. The narrative really does matter a lot more than the truth on this one. This is very important.
And the groypers are like Fuentes'
the groyper is just like the anti-Jewish, anti-Israel, whatever. The point is that this right here actually explains a lot. Because this wasn't the only person saying this. In fact, go to the original tweet that he had that showed the explanation of what all of these different tweets on Blue Sky
meant. It's just hard to...
No, there was another one that was scrolling up. It was at the top. There we go. So what they did is they did a screenshot. And they said Blue Sky libs are freaking out that their fake narrative has collapsed and are now admitting that they have to continue the propaganda even if it's a total lie. This is one of the things that is so important to understand, and which more people now are understanding on a level that I don't think they have before. The truth doesn't matter to them. What matters to them is the end state, the objective, the goals that they're trying to reach. And so therefore, if the truth in a particular case doesn't reinforce the narrative will win. And you need to understand that when somebody adopts that kind of moral framework, the question that you have to ask yourself is it possible to have a rational conversation with them? Because that's a big question coming in right now. Can we still continue to have the sort of conversations that Charlie was attempting to have? If someone is willing to resort to this, where they say, okay, it's fake, I know it's fake, and I'm going to perpetuate it anyways because it's too important to achieve my end state. How are you supposed to have a reasonable, rational communication or conversation with someone like that?
The answer is you cannot.
Unfortunately, it gets worse because you were talking about reactions after the shooting.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw this one from Destiny, but there's a much more disturbing clip from him after. You got to understand, this is after the shooting. Listen to this.
Well, no, that's Ilhan Omar. You want to?
Oh, sorry. I moved it around. This is it. This is it. Listen to this.
Democrat podcaster Destiny he said, you need conservatives to be afraid of getting killed when they go to events. Go ahead and play this.
Acting like Charlie had it coming.
If you wanted Charlie Kirk to be alive, Donald Trump shouldn't have been president for the second term.
You need conservatives to be afraid of getting killed when they go to events so that they look to their leadership to turn down the temperature. The issue is right now, they don't feel like there's any fear.
That guy's name's Destiny.
Pause.
And he just learned his fate. He's fired.
So see what he said there, because there's something that's really interesting about his logic or his reasoning. Destiny is someone that has been put forward by the left as someone that can go out and contend with the Jordan Petersons of the world, or the Charlie Kirks or the Ben Shapiros, right? He's actually debated some of these people. And it was because for a while there, I would watch Destiny debate and I would disagree with them, but I could follow his line of reasoning on certain things. What's interesting here is if you look at his line of reasoning, it's if you wanted Charlie Kirk to be alive, Donald Trump shouldn't have won a second term. So what is that? Well, he died because Donald Trump is a fascist or is evil or is bad, and because he got elected, the left was forced to resort to these sort of ends. He goes, conservatives should be afraid when they go out. That way, they'll change their leadership to bring down the temperature. So think about that for a second.
That's actually terror tactics.
We'll think about that for a second. It's like, conservatives, we will continue to murder you until you bring down the temperature. Think about that reasoning for a second. Think about what it takes to arrive at that kind of logic. Not when you're in like a shooting war, right? You could understand if you were involved in a war and you said that the way that I'm going to end this war is I'm going to make the war so devastating that you quit. That's how you would talk in a war.
They're using that same language.
That's why Sherman burned Atlanta to the ground. He was like, we're going to go total war because I want war to be so horrible that they stop. It was one of the reasons why we dropped the bombs in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. It's like, we don't want to send millions of Americans into a land invasion of Japan. And so we're going to create this weapon of such devastation that the other side gives up. That's the logic that's being used here. That's the logic that you use when you're talking about an enemy you're at war with. So I want people to understand, it's not that it's illogical. It's that we keep thinking, oh, this Democrat is being irrational or is being unreasonable. No, Destiny is intelligent enough to understand what he's saying and to construct the arguments in such a way as to accurately convey what he believes. And what he believes is he is at war with us, and enough of us have to either die, feel fear, or be intimidated in order to elicit the sort of political response that he wants. So once again, when I state diametrically opposed worldviews at war with one another, this is not me creating something out of thin air. This is me listening to people like this and recognizing what they're saying. Now, the obvious response is going to be like, oh, fine, you found one liberal podcaster. Okay, let's go to the next one.
Well, except that we didn't, because we also just showed a bunch of liberal leaders saying some very similar things before the assassination.
Here's another liberal podcaster.
David Pakman. Charlie Kirk's funeral is absolutely disgusting, riddled with speeches that only dial up the temperature. Stephen Miller's was particularly vile. I love it when they talk about us dialing up the temperature. Okay, well, the temperature was set by someone who murdered somebody in front of their family. How did we dial it up from there?
You know what's funny?
How did we dial it up from there?
And not only that, but the temperature was also set by everyone just cheering over this.
Yeah.
I mean, the left was ecstatic, and they had a really hard time not showing it.
So this is what he said in Reddit.
No. This is the conversation that's going on within his subreddit.
Oh, okay.
And somebody replied, this account Reddit Lies said, meanwhile, on your subreddit, this is the sort of conversation that's going on David Pakman's own subreddit.
So David Pakman is accusing Stephen Miller of raising the temperature, which I looked back and I was like, oh my gosh, Stephen Miller must have gone out and murdered 2 leftists in order to raise the temperature from the left murdering 1 conservative. Nope. Stephen Miller just said the things. Okay. Well, what was going on David Pakman's, Reddit thread? Look, we all know they literally hate everyone who isn't white, straight, or Christian. They are not compatible with people different than they. Therefore, they don't belong in such a diverse population like the U.S. We don't need the ethnocentrism from the deplorables. So again, David Pakman. Again, if you want to dismiss Destiny, which you certainly weren't dismissing him recently, this guy is also another mainstream person within the left. But now I want to go to an individual named...
And let's not forget that the whole word deplorables came from Hillary Clinton calling us, saying we're all in a basket of deplorables.
Yeah.
So they've been separating us out for ages.
It doesn't end with Pakman and
Nope.
Destiny,
Now we're going to go to Hasan Piker. And so I want to thank Amala for putting this compilation together. The reason why we brought up Hasan Piker is because if you go out there and you do a Grok search for Hasan, the left-wing response to Joe Rogan, you're going to find all of these, hopeful articles on the left saying, is Hasan Piker our response to Joe Rogan? Now, keep something in mind. Joe Rogan's not a conservative. Right? Joe Rogan is not a conservative.
He was just genuine. He would ask questions in a genuinely curious manner and allow people to answer them.
So Hasan Piker, there's multiple articles out there talking about Hasan Piker being the left-wing Joe Rogan or the left-wing podcaster or the person that could go into these environments and debate the Charlie Kirks and the Ben Shapiros and win, right? That was their guy, Hasan Piker, right? We're going to show you a compilation of some of the things that Hasan Piker has done. Go ahead and hit play.
Here's his clip.
Kill them. Kill those motherfuckers and murder those motherfuckers.
motherfuckers in the street. Let the streets soak in their fucking red capitalist bloods, dude.
That's pretty ridiculous. Like,
yeah, it doesn't end
let
there.
the streets run red with their blood.
The red capitalist blood. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead and play a little bit more. I want to see some of these other ones.
And murder those motherfuckers in the street. Let the streets soak in their fucking red capitalist bloods, dude.
Right. These people are crazy.
Yeah, you think?
Yeah, go to the next one. I thought there was another one with Hasan.
Oh yeah, there's another one of this is him before Charlie's.
Yeah.
Like he's been doing this before and after.
Yeah. Keep in mind, Hasan Piker had made these kind of comments when the left was elevating him as a potential, Joe Rogan of the left.
So listen to this. This was.
Yeah, sorry. The last one.
Yeah,
language.
There's going to be some rough language for the live audience. It should be edited out.
Nate's going to have fun bleeping out every other word from Hasan, who loves to drop the F-bomb. But listen to this.
I'm sick and tired of it. Left-wingers, liberals, you need to be fucking showing your opponent's guts on there, okay? You need to be gutting them. You need to be shanking these motherfuckers and letting their intestines just ride on stage. What the fuck is this shit, man? Slice them up. Slice them and fucking dice them. What the fuck is this? You cannot have a bigger fucking layup. You could not have had a bigger fucking layup than a horrible candidate like her.
So there you go. Again, we brought up Hasan because the left, 5 minutes ago, the left was like, oh, this is going to be the guy. In fact, Charlie Kirk was scheduled to debate him. And then when Charlie Kirk got murdered, Hasan Piker was like, well, the real concern is what could happen to me. Well, this is...
Look at how the media is portraying this. Here's Politico. What Hasan Piker told his millions of followers after Charlie Kirk was shot. If it wasn't an apology...
Yeah.
I mean, you know what's crazy? Is that the mainstream media is still platforming these guys.
Yeah.
Like at the same time that we went through years of cancel culture, right? Nobody on the right was saying anything remotely as vile or violent as what people like Destiny, people like Hasan Piker were saying.
And I don't understand why they're now saying, I'm so worried about political violence against me. What do you mean you're worried about that? You were out there telling people to gut people on the right on camera in front of everybody. Like, you want this to happen to people on the right. And now you're worried that the right is now awake to it and that somebody could retaliate. You're worried about someone retaliating against what you've been desirous of this entire time for people that oppose you.
And to keep in mind with Destiny, this is not the first time Destiny has called for political violence, actively called for political violence. When the assassination or the assassination attempt on Trump took place and an innocent man was murdered in the audience, Destiny took to social media to specifically call out and mock that person and say that he was glad he was killed. So this is, and when he was doing all this, was the left like, oh no, we've got to tone down the rhetoric? No. So again, 4 questions. Do we want the same thing? Is there a return? Is there a return, at least by the left, of this idea of not viewing the people on the other side as your fellow countrymen for which you have disagreements, but rather your enemies, which need to be defeated and eradicated, right? Is there a glorification of political violence? And is there a critical mass on the left that actually believes these things? Yes, 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 and yes.
Yeah. I mean, if you go back to the original graph that Christian had up, showing who believes political violence is okay, you'll also notice that moderates are above conservatives as well. So people,
for the youngest cohort,
people that self-describe themselves as moderates also have extreme enough views to believe that people deserve to be punished for disagreeing. So all these people that are like, oh, well, I'm a moderate. It's like, well, what is a moderate anyway?
Well,
clearly you're not that moderate You're not very moderate if you think that people that disagree with you need to be killed or hurt.
So I think we've made the argument the left wants a very, very different United States than the right wants. They absolutely see us as enemies. I don't care what Candy King decides to say later when it's politically convenient. They do. There has been a steady glorification of political violence of the worst possible kind. And there's no question that this has reached a critical mass on the left. When you have a compilation of all of their top tier candidates repeatedly saying these things, you cannot argue that they don't have a critical mass for all this. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to talk about what we might call the moderates or the people that haven't really fallen into either of these camps. But before we do that, I want to thank our other sponsor, and that is True Classic. Like I said before, it takes a certain level of courage to be able to sponsor ads on a show like ours. And we love True Classic, once again, not just because they have the courage to be able to allow public discourse to take place, but because they also create a great product, right? If True Classic was willing to sponsor with us, but they didn't create a great product, I wouldn't be recommending it to you. But they do both. And I know this because I was using True Classic long before I had ever met any of them, we had talked to any of them, or long before they had ever offered to be able to advertise on our show before. And the reason why I love them so much is because, again, guys, I'm not a big clothes shopper. My wife was the one that found True Classic. It all started with a pack of 5 t-shirts. And I remember putting them on going, this is the first time in a long time I felt like I put on a t-shirt that fits me the way I would like a t-shirt to fit me. But they didn't stop there, ladies and gentlemen. They came out with workout equipment. Right now I am wearing a button down. I don't typically like to wear button downs, but I like these because it gives a little bit more of a formal look. It's still incredibly comfortable. And again, it fits you the way you want to look, right? Because again, if your wife is the one saying, hey, I like how that looks on you, that's a good sign, gentlemen. That is a very, very good sign. So go to trueclassic.com/Nick and check out the different bundles that you can get. Again, maybe you want to date True Classic first. Fine, get a pack of the 5 t-shirts. See what I'm talking about. Maybe you're just already convinced. Really take a look at their dress wear, take a look at their formal shirts, take a look at their workout gear. Like, they've got it all. Plus, you can also find True Classic now at stores like Costco, at Target. So again, you can get True Classic a lot of places right now. Check the link in the description to find out more. Again, I am super happy with the product. I wear it almost every day at this point. So trueclassic.com/Nick, check them out. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into, we struggled with how to categorize this. But when it comes to the whole idea of, do we want different things? Do we see as friend or enemies? Is there a glorification of political violence? Is there a critical mass? When we look at these people, as we call them the moderates because we couldn't come up with a better term. But honestly, this is comprised of people that are liberal. They describe as liberal. It's certain Republicans. It's certain libertarians. And the best way I could describe this group is they look at the murder of Charlie Kirk. And let's clarify something real quick, because right off the bat, we've already answered one of these questions, but I want to make sure it's very clear. One of the things that we said is, why did Charlie's death change everything? And I need you to understand this. It wasn't just that Charlie was murdered. It was the left's reaction to Charlie being murdered. Because there are any number of people on the right that if the same thing would have happened, it would have been equally as horrific. It would have been equally as wrong, but it wouldn't have had the same impact. There was something unique about the fact that they murdered Charlie in front of his wife, in front of his children. They murdered the guy that wanted to have conversations with them, that was not afraid of going onto their turf and having those peaceful conversations. And then they were perfectly comfortable with gleefully celebrating it online that this man had been murdered. So I want people to understand. I really want the left to understand. Killing Charlie was bad enough in and of itself, but your reaction to it is what signified to so many people that something had changed forever and we couldn't continue as we were, except to the category we're talking about right now. They still believe certain people left, right, and center within this category, they still believe that this was just about insightful rhetoric. This was about mental health. This was about guns. This was about lowering the temperature or raising the temperature.
This was about both sides.
This was about both sides. This was about we need to stand together in unity and solidarity during this difficult moment. These are the people that don't get it because they refuse to, right? This is the liberal that wants to say, you know what, I didn't agree with, obviously with what happened to Charlie. I didn't agree with what he said, but this is horrible. And this is why we need to tone down the rhetoric. Because if we just tone down the rhetoric, that'll make it all go away. That will make the moral framework that has been created over decades now, that will make that moral framework just instantly go away tomorrow. To the people on the right, you honestly think, I saw somebody just today. This is, I saw this Republican, this Democrat shaking hands on the campaign trail. This is the Virginia way. Yes, I'm very familiar with the Virginia way. What it's supposed to be is the idea that we recognize that we're all Virginians, or you could expand this to the rest of the country and say we're all Americans. We just have some different ideas. We want our people to be happy, healthy, prosperous, and free. We just have different ideas on how to get there, right? And so that's what we should do. That's what we should be focused on. And then one side of that conversation leaves 5 minutes after you've made this declaration, and they call you a bigot, a racist, a sexist, a fascist, a threat to democracy. I'm sorry. The Virginia way died. That method of looking at things died before Charlie was murdered. But if you still can't see it after Charlie was murdered, after the left's reaction to Charlie's murder, after prominent members of Congress, governors,
the very person you're glad-handing with,
you can't see it, that you still can't see it. I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you anymore.
Some people just simply don't know what time it is.
I don't know what to tell you anymore.
I've got some examples that I want to blitz through to demonstrate this. Here's Senator James Lankford in Oklahoma. He gave an interview to CNN and immediately turned it into this is a both sides issue. He was citing, he talked about white supremacy and Timothy McVeigh. That was like,
oh my gosh,
30 years ago.
In the 90s. It was last century ago.
And
and by the way, name me all the Republican politicians. Name me all the people
that defended McVeigh.
Name me all the people that wrote articles saying, well, I don't agree with Timothy McVeigh blowing up the building, but that did not happen. That did not happen. Mm-hmm. It universally condemned by every prominent person on the right. Universally condemned.
Can I just say that the Virginia way, that died probably over a decade ago. And I'll give you one example as to how that died. When Ed Gillespie was running for governor of Virginia, the left put together commercials of some redneck with an Ed Gillespie sticker on his vehicle running down immigrant children in his truck. It was a campaign commercial. Yeah. The Virginia way's been dead a long time on the left, and the people on the right were just in denial as to when it died or if it could be revived. I'm sorry, your Virginia way died. It died a long time ago, and you let it die.
Yeah.
Here's an example from Sean Davis quoting Bari Weiss. You might be familiar with her. She's
actually said a lot of really good things.
Editor of the Free Press. Well, unfortunately, Bari does not understand what time it is.
Yeah.
She had a tweet about talking about the Jimmy Kimmel thing. First off, she fell into the trap of thinking this was the FCC that took this down rather than that it was ABC that used this as an excuse to pull the plug on a failing program.
Yeah.
And all these people came out on the right and were celebrating the fact that Jimmy Kimmel's show got pulled. And I think rightfully so, considering that Kimmel lied on the show about the shooter being MAGA. He literally said the shooter was apparently one of their guys.
Yeah.
Total lie. And then he got canned. And Bari came out and was like, the typical, those on the right who are seeing this, remember that Democrats will wield this power again. When have they ever not wielded this power?
This is why
this whole both sides thing and setting a dangerous precedent. And well, you can't do this because they might retaliate. When have they ever restrained themselves? We will sit there and we will obey the rules. We will obey the process. We will not wield power against them because that goes against our principles, right? We don't want to live in a world where the government's being weaponized against our enemies. And then they will get into office and they will do all of that. Without us ever triggering them in response. They just do it out of principle.
Here's what I would say, and I want to caution everybody because we're about to get to the other side of this, the right that I would say has, no pun intended, woken up. But the argument of like, can you imagine if the shoe was on the other foot? Yes. Like, well, imagine if Democrats were wielding this. What do you mean imagine? What do you mean contemplate? What do you mean think about? I know already what it looks like. And so here's what I would say. As someone who still believes that we need to be very, very cautious about government power, right? I'm not going to stop being worried about that because I'm pissed right now. But as someone who still believes in that, I am so tired. I'm so tired of this kind of reasoning because it fails to recognize that this is already happening. And like you said, and this is a very, very important thing, because I said something the other day that a lot of people agreed with, the usual suspects hated, but a lot of people that I generally agree with were like, Nick, I don't know about this, like this FCC thing. It's like, again, we're buying in to the lie that this was all because Donald Trump picked up the phone, called the FCC, and they shut off the show. If that was true, why is his show back on? No, what ABC is realizing, the same thing that the people that were hiring Steve Colbert realized, their show's bleeding money. That's the problem. But anyways, so Barry Weiss made this comment, and it's kind of the standard thing. It's like, conservatives beware, whatever power you wield can be used against you. And we're like, yeah, we're already aware.
It already has been.
But here's what the response was. But
I mean, they deplatformed the president of the United States. Yeah. So they've been doing this long before.
The response from Sean Davis was really eye-opening on this in a good way. So Sean Davis is the CEO of The Federalist, which is a conservative online magazine. And one of his chief editors and writers is Molly Hemingway, who has really been sounding the alarm on this.
But by the way, Molly actually texted me and said, hey, I saw your tweet. Can we publish it as an article? I was like, absolutely. So my article went on The Federalist.
So Sean Davis quoted Barry on this. And by the way, it's worth noting, Sean Davis is not like me, where he's like, I'm a post-liberal and we need to like, he is a very standard conservative Republican is what he is.
Yes.
He is not a radical. He is, I mean, he has been a mainstream conservative Republican, fighting the good fight for well over a decade now in the online space, running this magazine. And he quoted her and was like, what planet do you live on? And he talks about some of the stuff that you were just bringing up. He's like, look, Charlie Kirk was murdered for speaking. The whole imagine if the shoe was on the other foot is delusional, in part because we're not going out there shooting left-wing speakers and then celebrating that fact, right? Like for example, the former speaker of the Minnesota House of Representatives was assassinated a few months ago.
Yeah.
Universally condemned on the right. That act
they
of
also
terrorism.
tried to make it out like that guy was of the right when what that guy was a lunatic.
He was a lunatic leftist with a history with those people.
Yeah, well, he'd actually been appointed to a commission by Governor Walsh.
Yeah.
Like this whole and some of the stuff he said was there was theories like he was going to open up a Senate seat for Governor Walsh. Yeah, that sounds like a real right-wing guy. No, that guy was a nut job.
Well,
there is a distinction. There is a distinction between people that kill someone for legitimate mental health issues and people that kill someone for ideologically driven issues.
But the two people that he killed had just taken a vote that was the catalyst for it to basically not oppose the president's plan.
That was also left out.
That was left out.
The two Democrats that were shot, one killed and the other one wounded, had actually crossed the aisle to vote with Republicans. I think it was on immigration related issues. But anyway, Sean Davis continues with this response and he brings up some very legitimate points. He talks about, for example,
he goes, let's talk about actual censorship for a moment. The federal government explicitly targeted Federalists, the publication I founded and run, for destruction. It bullied social media companies to censor both Molly Hemingway and me for our opinion, not for our opinions, but for reporting indisputable facts. Regulators bullied advertisers into banning us. We were put on blacklist by our own government. Millions were spent on grants and software developed to algorithmically suppress us indefinitely. As a result, the censorship we faced and the damage we incur as a result of it are still ongoing. We sued the federal government for relief years ago and still have not received any relief. Where were you in all this? Did you ever stand up for us after we were explicitly targeted for destruction by the government? Any tweets or op-eds in support of an actual journalistic publication being ravaged by government censorship? Any calls to punish those who spearheaded massive and illegal government conspiracies to destroy entire journalistic outlets? Of course not. We were neither neocons nor celebrities in your personal social circle. But when Jimmy Kimmel viciously and deliberately lied, violating long-standing broadcast rules, and put even more Christians and conservatives at risk of being shot and killed by left-wing ideologues, you sure were quick to jump to his defense. There's a reason for that massively disparate response, and it sure as heck isn't principle. Again, this is one of the things where there's a careful line to be walked, because we do believe in freedom of speech. But we're tired of the you better be careful, or else when the Democrats are back in charge, they'll wield this. They're already doing it. They've already been doing it. Stop warning us about something that we're already incredibly familiar with. But again, it's this kind of thing where it's you got to stand by your principles. I agree. We need to stand by our principles. But we also need to understand that they see us as enemies. It is not a violation of their principles to use the government to censor us. It is not a violation of their principles, apparently, to murder us. And not every Democrat thinks that. Great. I didn't say. What did we say? Critical mass. Is there enough people on the left that believe this who will give aid and comfort to it or actually engage in the actions? The answer is yes. That's not my opinion. We've demonstrated this over and over and over again. And yet we still have Republicans. We still have liberals, right? I'm not calling them leftists. I make a distinction. I know liberals. I'm going to put Bill Maher in this category just as an example that everyone can probably grasp onto. Bill Maher is someone that I disagree with probably on 90 to 95% of public policy. But Bill Maher believes that the laws of logic exist. Bill Maher doesn't believe that if the truth violates your preferred preference or preferred narrative, that you ditch the truth and go with the narrative. All right, so I can recognize that Bill Maher is someone that I can probably peacefully coexist with. But Bill Maher ain't leading the charge. Bill Maher has been abandoned by the left. Not because he no longer believes in Social Security or an elaborate welfare program or more immigration. No. He's been abandoned by the left because he refused to celebrate the same things that the left are currently celebrating.
There's more examples of this hand-wringing that you see within, certain elements of the right or moderates. So there's this clip of Matt Walsh on the Charlie Kirk show. For those who aren't aware, the last week or so, there's been a series of conservatives that have gone on the show, kind of giving tributes to Charlie.
Yeah.
Well, Matt Walsh was on with Michael Knowles and Ben Shapiro. They, the Daily Wire crew basically did a special episode for Charlie. And Walsh was pointing out some very basic facts here. Just listen to this for a second, then I'll show you the reaction here. So Matt Walsh said, there at the very end, you can see that there's the Daily Wire crew. I can't remember who this is, but there's Ben Shapiro, there's Michael Knowles.
Yeah.
And then obviously they've left Charlie's chair open. But Matt Walsh uttered a specific phrase that triggered tons of hand wringing from James Lindsay to this guy here. And, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but, he's going into the whole, he used the term friend enemy distinction. That all comes from Carl Schmitt. Therefore, he's a Nazi. And Matt Walsh responded and he's like, okay, so you're telling me that until 1930, whatever, that nobody understood the concept of who an enemy is?
Yeah.
Like, and the fact that you're right, you've got just all these guys that are writing these like paragraphs and paragraphs, morally lecturing a conservative champion like Matt Walsh because he used a specific phrase that's traced to Carl Schmitt and said, therefore, the real problem here is not the fact that the left is murdering our conservative political influencers and activists and organizers. It's not the fact that they're getting up by literally the millions in cheering this on. No, the real danger here is that we have certain figures on the right, like Matt Walsh, that are using dangerous rhetoric here.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
nothing
and
that
Nick-
Matt Walsh said in that 41-second clip about if he died, he knows that everybody on
Is
the right
absolutely true.
would mourn him, and that everybody on the left, not everybody, but a huge chunk of the left would celebrate his death if he died.
But he used a buzz phrase to describe it, and that's what they latched onto. And Nick actually highlighted this right after everything was going on, is how many people on the right will jump on your case and think that, oh, be careful, don't say this or don't say you. And he's calling them the right scolds now. You know, you've got the woke scolds, and now you've got the right scolds
Now,
as well.
you know what they
and
really
I
are?
actually said something in my own tweet, which I don't usually use X very much, but I thought maybe I needed to, is I highlighted those people and I said, some of you will step over the body of our martyr in order to make sure that the left is comfortable with their own rhetoric, and so, and we see who you are and we're done with it. Like, I'm done with it. I see you.
I need to go retweet
and
that.
I'm done with it. And the reason I said that is because I saw a lot of people, even in my own community, just doing just falling all over themselves to make sure that all the leftists in our community and around Virginia were comfortable with the fact that they're one of the good guys and hopefully will get shot last.
Yeah. It is one of those things where I'm just done with it, right? And like, I look at this stuff right now and it's almost this whole, you have no power here, right? Like, I don't care. And again, I don't use that phrase, I don't care, loosely. I really mean it. When somebody, I had somebody send me somebody who supports me, sent me a link to I think it was a Substack page of a Christian conservative who was taking me to task over my tweet, specifically about this whole concept of, again, the diametrically opposed worldviews. And he didn't just resort to like an argument trying to break it down. He resorted to kind of like mocking me, I'm a fake tough guy and the whole deal. And that's fine. And he's like, would you please respond to this? And my answer was no. Why? It's like, well, first of all, nobody's reading this guy. And second of all, and I don't mean that flippantly, it's just that I'm not going to elevate a narrative I already think is ridiculous. The other thing is, this guy is somebody that chases clout by attacking the right from the right. That's, I don't care anymore. I don't care what you think, because I've been in enough political battles where I've been sitting
from the right or from the left.
You know what I mean? He claims to be a conservative, but he's only attacking. I know what you mean. I don't mean
like
for the right.
Some people on the right punch right.
Yeah, that's all he is.
That's what you mean.
That's
He's
what I mean.
punching right and almost pandering left. Oh,
Yes.
yeah. Those people are the ones that are universally coming out here and saying, this is a both sides issue. We need
Fringe.
to, yeah.
It's the guy like Bill
It's the National
Kristol.
Review type
It's
people.
the Bill
Yeah.
Kristol who just totally went over to the left at this point. And it's because there's a certain thing that they're chasing, right? And I'm sure for some of them they believe that, well, I'm taking the morally more difficult position. But I look around and it's like, are you though? Right? Are you someone that is just adamant about holding the right to account? Because I can appreciate that. I believe that we need to hold our own side to account. That we need to make sure that our side is living up to our principles. I believe in that. I just don't believe that's what this guy is doing. I believe what it is that this is the sort of behavior where I want to be seen as the good conservative by the networks. I want to be seen as the good conservative by my liberal friend group, where they hate everyone except for me because I'm the good one. And like Tina said, it's like you're negotiating to get shot last, dude.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in that. If you want to be the sort of person that sits on the sidelines, claims to believe what we believe, but spends 90% of your time critiquing the right, then I'm going to look at you as, okay, you are what Teddy Roosevelt talked about, and that is you're the critic. You always sit close enough to see the fight, but never get close enough to actually get any damage. Right? Because you need to stay back here because you need to be the one that the liberals will listen to. Dude, they're not listening to you. You're their useful idiot.
Nick, at the start of this podcast, you were talking about how Charlie's death has changed a lot of things. One of the things that I think that has changed is that a large chunk of the right, obviously not the entire right, but a large chunk of the right, I think no longer is seeking the affirmation and approval of people who hate them. And want them dead. And that's what Walsh was getting at in that clip right there, is that, look, you need liberals and leftists to lose, not to like you. They only like you when you are powerless, weak, defenseless, and dead.
Yes.
They don't like you if you're a threat, if you wield power. And I don't mean that in a tyrannical way. I mean, if your worldview is the one that's running the show, if you're in charge, if we're living in the world that conservatives want to be living in, the left won't like you. They will hate you. They will want you dead. They will cheer you when you die. The days of us seeking affirmation from the high status people on the left at the New York Times or Washington Post is over. I don't care what these people think about me or my friends or my family or people that are on my side.
I'm going to say it a little bit differently.
Actually, I do somewhat care.
I'm going to say it a little bit differently. I do care what they think of me. And at this point, I hope they hate my guts. Like I've had some people ever since this whole happened that came in and I had somebody respond to me and be like, I've never met you and I don't think I ever want to, but you're a disgrace as a delegate. And I finally responded to one of them and I basically said, I am glad you hate me. I would think there was something terribly wrong with what I believed in the world. If you can look at everything that's going on and decide that I'm the real problem here, I am glad you hate me. Please continue to send me angry emails. I want you to know that it's a great source of encouragement for me. That's how I feel now. It's like, no.
I love being hated by the right people.
You had, there was so much time because of, and again, this is in Romans 12. A lot of Romans 12 lately. Romans 12. It's as much as it is within your power, live in peace with everyone. As much as it is in your power. Well, here's the deal. It is not in my power to violate the core principles which I believe are truth. They're not my principles in the sense that I created them. It is revelation. I believe I am conforming what I believe to what God says is moral and good, not what Nick has decided is convenient for him to believe. So it is not within my power to abandon those things. So if you insist that the only way we can live in peace with one another is I must abandon the things that are absolutely core to my existence, my answer is no. And I'm under no obligation to live at peace with someone that would insist that of me. And that is where we're at. And it used to be at the very least, my attitude was, well, I don't want to cause a scene. And guess what? I still don't. The difference is that I no longer feel it is incumbent upon me to make you feel comfortable. I just don't. I am happy to live my life, mind my business, and do what I need to do. You guys are the ones that come up to us. And now I fall into this third category. Now I want to make something very, very clear. This third category is broad. There is people in this third category that I don't associate myself with. There are people in this third category that recognize what's going on. Right? So the first category, the left, they recognize what's going on. This is one of the weird things about this entire episode is that the left gets it. A lot of Republicans, a lot of liberals, a lot of these people, they don't get it. They don't get it. But now there is a critical mass on the right that gets it. I get what this is now. It doesn't mean that I'm going to glorify political violence. It doesn't mean I'm going to return evil for evil. But no, I don't see you as my fellow countrymen anymore that I'm having a civil disagreement with. Why? Because you celebrated Charlie Kirk getting murdered in front of his kids. We're not friends. You want something that would necessarily, by definition, include the destruction of the things that I love and believe in. Yes, you have chosen to be my enemy. I did not put you in this category. I finally recognized how you saw me. And as we say in the military, and as it says in Romans 12, you get a choice. Before any operation we ever did, we would plan everything out. And then there was always this little comment. We'd go, yeah, we've got our plan, but the enemy gets a say. You've treated me like an enemy for well over a decade. Don't get angry at me when I recognize, fine, that's what I am. I didn't want this. I wanted a civil discussion with a fellow countryman. You decided I was your enemy. I accept your terms. I don't accept your end state. That's the category I find myself in right now. And the bottom line is, I'm seeing a lot of other people on the right as well that have finally said, they're like, look, we're not going to return. Anybody on the right saying we're going to return evil for evil, I'm not in that category. That is not my ally. That is not who I'm fighting alongside with. But the same chapter in Romans that says, love your enemies, bless those who curse you. You know what it also says? What it says like in chapter 9, it says, abhor evil. For too long in this country, we have tried to compromise with evil. Not with human beings that disagree with us. Because as a Christian, I believe that nobody is beyond the saving grace of Christ. There's a reason why Scripture talks about our fight is not against flesh and blood. That there's a spiritual component to this. Because no one is beyond the redemption of Christ. But people can choose to side with evil. Mm-hmm. They can choose to do evil things. And insofar as you want to persist in doing something evil, and newsflash, murdering Charlie Kirk in front of his wife and kids was evil. Guess what's also evil? Celebrating it.
You know, it's interesting because we've lived in a world for the past decade or so, maybe a little longer, where the left is very much about cutting off friends and family who voted for Trump or cutting people off for their political views. And on the right, largely, we have not done that. We've always kept the door open. We've always been hospitable to people. We want you to feel welcome in our presence. In fact, we won't even push the envelope. We'll try not to bring up political disputes or anything like that in order to keep the peace at our family gatherings and things like that. We always want to keep that door open to those who have cut us off. And I think we're finding ourselves now in a new chapter where now we're ready to close the door. And the reason we're ready to close the door, I was talking with a dear friend of mine about this. She was talking about how badly it hurts to see those she loves celebrating Charlie Kirk's death and assassination, and basically laughing at it, mocking it, and getting some kind of joy out of it. And I said to her, I think what hurts the most is the realization that you're watching Satan laugh at one of God's anointed ones through someone you love. Mm-hmm. So you love this person and you never wanted to think that they were capable of these dark thoughts, these dark things. And now you realize they are. And it makes you wonder, like, Satan's laughing through them. The demons are laughing through them. Are they going to also laugh through them when you die? Mm-hmm. And you start realizing that they've actually put you in a category already long ago. And it's very concerning. We are in this position now where, are we communing with the demonic by keeping that door open. We're not supposed to sit and sup with people who operate in evil ways. We're not supposed to share bread with them, have a meal with them. Have we been doing this for all this time, thinking the door was still open and that our arms are still open? We're waiting for you. You're the prodigal. We want you back. Now, are there some instances where that's just simply not the case and they've gone their way? And now we need to shake the dust off, because there are scriptures that line up with various scenarios that you might find yourself in where we misidentifying this scenario. And now what we need to recognize is now, okay, maybe we've been casting our pearls before swine, not to say that somebody is swine, but to say that we are throwing something of value at the feet of someone who will trample it. Is that what we're doing now? And so I think a lot of us have come to the realization that we've been leaving the door open to a lot of people who do nothing but crap all over everything we believe in and everything we love. And they're itching at the opportunity to just crap on you when you die, And
tolerance of evil is not a Christian virtue.
No.
Right. And so we're all starting to realize that there is something utterly demonic happening. And it's the realization that we love some of these people who are engaging in it. And I think that's what hurts our soul to the core.
Well, the interesting thing about the prodigal son is that the prodigal was insulting his father as his father was handing over the inheritance. The father did not chase the prodigal and sit there and try to prevent every bad decision they were making.
Right.
The father allowed the prodigal son to do what he was going to do. It was in the absence of the father. It was once the prodigal had achieved everything he thought would bring him peace and joy and satisfaction in this world and was left absolutely empty inside that he started to miss the presence of the father.
Yeah,
And
they can't get to that point if they've never mourned the absence of you.
Yeah, that's when he returned. All right, we're going to read this tweet from Michael Knowles, because again, the more I get to know Michael Knowles, and I've actually had an opportunity to have more just one-on-one conversations.
I know, I'm jealous.
Off camera with Michael Knowles. The more I just really genuinely like this guy, not because he's just intelligent or we agree on things philosophically, but just because he's just a very genuinely nice guy. But he's not afraid to lay it out there. So Michael Knowles said this: in the wake of Charlie's assassination, many people are demanding that we redouble our devotion to the free marketplace of ideas. The call seems at first glance courageous and noble. In reality, it is reckless and impractical. We had an open market of ideas. The left shot it up. Not only have extreme leftists committed violence in the marketplace of ideas, more scandalous still, mainstream left-wing voices have cheered and made light of the violence. There can be no open marketplace of ideas or anything else under such conditions. Marketplaces require rules, confidence, and common media of exchange. They require, in other words, order. Liberty requires order. One cannot be both free and undisciplined, for instance, or free and ignorant. We know this philosophically, and we also know it intuitively. It's why we don't let toddlers vote. What we require now is the reassertion of order. We must insist upon the acceptance of basic truths and moral goods, not as asymptotic goal of endless debate, but as the axiomatic foundation without which debate cannot occur. We must foreclose certain antisocial behaviors and suicidal ideologies. We must, to borrow a phrase from Chesterton, stop the thought that stops thought. In practical terms, this means we must stigmatize certain evil ideas and behaviors, and we must ostracize people who insist upon them. More practically, this means that people who persist in such disorder should lose their social standing. In certain cases, they should lose their jobs. There must be consequences. With any political reform, it is wise to err on the side of caution. The offenses that merit such ostracism should be practically egregious or particularly egregious. A good place to begin with would be with those who celebrate the murder of an innocent man. I love what he's saying here, because he is getting at a distinction that I was trying to make yesterday, and I will admit probably didn't do the best job when I was talking about this concept of freedom of speech. And what I was trying to articulate, and I probably shouldn't have tried to do it in a 1 minute and 30-second reel, was that there is a certain category of people that have chosen, I keep using this very, very intentionally, because they don't have to choose this, but they have chosen it. They choose to use the frameworks that we have within civil society. They choose to appreciate the benefits of civilization while systematically trying to tear down the rules that make those benefits possible. And the argument that we keep hearing is, well, no, you have to maintain that. You have to maintain these principles. Otherwise, you're no better than them. And I think what Michael Knowles is getting at here is like, I think you're misunderstanding what we're saying. We're not saying that you shouldn't stick by your principles. What we are saying is that you should make a distinction between people who disagree with you, but share certain underlying principles which allow for debate and civilization to be possible, and those who will use the benefits of those rules of civilization to attack you when it is convenient, and then just as quickly abandon them when it is convenient. That person does not want to coexist with you. They want to defeat you. And if you are not willing to recognize that as a category, then they will continue to use your values, your principles, your structures against you for the purpose of destroying you and the principles. They are not principles in their hands. They are weapons in their hands. And this is the part where a lot of us are trying to figure out. We're asking a very earnest question. How do we combat that while maintaining our principles? Because we don't want to give them up. But we recognize that something here is different. They are treating us like they are at war and we are the enemy. I believe in the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution. I afforded nobody in Iraq Fourth Amendment privileges when I was fighting them. Why? Because we're at war and they were my enemy. The rules were very, very well defined. They didn't get the benefit of the United States Constitution. They might have gotten the benefits of the rules of land warfare, because there was a moral implication there that I had to follow lest I lose my own humanity. But they didn't get the full benefits of a civilization that I was trying to protect,
you weren't
of a
reading
constitution.
Them
I was not
rights?
reading them their Miranda rights. Why? Because we were at war. And now we find ourselves in a difficult situation because they're treating us like we're at war and we're not treating them the same way because we don't want to, for very good reason of what Michael Knowles just expressed. Because it's categorically very dangerous. So I don't want to treat them like we're at war. This is why, even in my statement, I didn't say we are people at war with one another. I said these are two diametrically opposed worldviews at war with each other, because they are. Because they are. So no, I don't want to suspend all constitutional rights for fellow citizens that consider that we're at war. But I also do not deny that they would do that to me in a heartbeat, provided they thought they could get away with it. The only thing preventing them from doing it is the fact that enough power still resides with us to be able to use the apparatus of power to punish them if they attempted to do so. The person that shot Charlie Kirk is in prison. Why? Because the apparatus within the United States says we have a legal system, and if you choose to operate outside these boundaries, you go to jail.
It's important to bring up that distinction because when the left gets angry, they commit political violence.
Mm-hmm.
This has been a common thing throughout history.
And
you see it in the French Revolution.
Yeah.
You saw it in the revolutions immediately after World War I. You saw it in Russia. You saw it in Italy. You saw it in Germany. You saw it with the communist uprisings in Weimar Germany. You saw it with the anarchist spree of assassination attempts and successes that took place in the late early 1900s, where our own president, William McKinley, was assassinated by an anarchist.
Well, let me.
But when the right gets angry, they don't resort to the crass lone wolf attack. You know, well, we're gonna commit vigilante justice. When the right gets angry, they use legitimate organs of government in order to correct an injustice that they see existing.
Well, and when you have people on the right that don't do that, it's considered abhorrent by the general right, because what we're looking for is the just you. There's a reason why you're starting to see, and I think this is a wonderful thing, because it's the only thing that's actually going to save the right. There's a reason why you now see this idea of conservatives coming forward and saying that classical liberalism, and by that I mean our structures of property rights, representative government, limitations on government power, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, these things cannot exist in and of themselves. They have to rest upon a certain agreed upon set of moral premises, and those moral premises have to be transcendent. It can't purely be up to the whims of what a majority happens to prefer in a given moment. This is why John Adams said, our Constitution was written for a moral and religious people and is totally unsuited to the government of any other. This is why when you see what is happening with Charlie Kirk, this is why he wasn't just saying socialism sucks. He wasn't just saying we need to win elections. He was saying, no, we need to return to God. We need to return to those fundamental truths, because it's only upon those fundamental truths that you can build the rest of us. And this is the part where the secular classical liberals get mad at me. Nick, I loved everything you said right up until that point. Well, I'm sorry. I'm telling you what I believe is true. And that's not just from sitting there and thinking about it or reading about it or studying it. It's from observation of what I see going on in the real world time now. Because the people that are saying, well, this is just heightened rhetoric. This is just turn the temperature down. You don't understand the moral framework that has been created, and the moral framework they have created is perfectly logical within their worldview. Because if we really are Nazis, if we really are just bigots and fascists and sexists and threats to democracy, and that represents the pinnacle of that which is noble and true, insofar as you can even objectively define nobility or truth within their worldview, well, then of course they have to destroy me. But I'm resting my worldview. I'm on the same thing fundamentally that Michael Knowles is. That I do believe that order has to be restored. But order doesn't get to be restored in accordance with what Nick prefers. Order has to be restored in association with what God says order looks like.
That is an important distinction, because, and I know this all too well from my my adventures on the internet, because I'm constantly being accused of, you're a tyrant, you're a monster, you hate this country, you want to fundamentally change it. And I'm sitting here like, I read these type of like comments, and 99% of the time I just don't care. But every now and then I see somebody and it's kind of upsetting, because like I love this country. Yeah. And a lot of the people who say this stuff don't kind of know the journey that I went through, but you do. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think you know where I'm coming from, even if we don't always agree. We share that same frame of reference.
I remember when you were chastising me for not being libertarian enough.
Yeah, when Nick first got elected to the House of Delegates, I was telling him, like, you need to be a social progressive. Yeah. and I'm very glad that he wasn't. But the point is that it's upsetting when I see people sometimes that are like, you hate this country because you hate liberalism. Yeah. But what it is, for me, it was a journey to realize what you just articulated, that liberalism inevitably turns into this type of degenerate progressivism when it's divorced of a transcendent foundation that it can't build itself. Yeah. What we call liberalism, what we call classical liberalism, or even libertarianism, is the outsource of a moral and religious foundation. It is the product of a flourishing civilization that knows what it is, knows what it believes in, knows what is true, and knows what is eternal and transcendent. And then it can then produce what we call liberty. That's what we mean by ordered liberty.
Yeah.
But what we have right now is the foundation has been destroyed. I would argue, and this is where you get into the debate, I would argue that liberalism kind of contained the acid that destroyed the foundation. But you know what? Right or wrong, we now can course correct.
Yeah.
We now know what's necessary in order to prevent that acidic component of liberalism from destroying the foundation. So we get to run this experiment all over again if we want to.
Yeah.
We get to run this experiment all over again because we've now we've gone through the whole cycle from the Magna Carta to today, and we realize where we kind of fell short along the way, which means if we want to preserve liberty and we want to avoid totalitarianism, which is what you articulated as the distinction, if it's just what I want as an individual,
I don't want right-wing.
Well, that's really fleeting and temporary, right? We, from dust we came, from dust we will return, right? If we're just simply building the foundation around my whims, that's really arbitrary. That's how you get the darkness of the 20th century.
That's how you get right-wing authoritarianism, which I don't want.
That is how you get, like when the left says, you're Nazis, you're fascists. That's what those things are. They're much deeper than that, right? But they were a corrupted attempt to restore some sort of order divorced of a moral lawgiver. Instead, it's the orders dictated by the Fuhrer or the Deuce, or these are men.
Well,
and what distinguishes between the totalitarianism of the 20th century and, say, the righteous ordered liberty of say most of English history, most of American history, was that we were not saying, oh, well, the leader says this, and so therefore it must be good because the guy in charge said it. No, instead we said, we have this objective criteria of how to discover truth. It is found in the Gospels. It is found in the Old and New Testaments. It's found within the Greco-Roman philosophical tradition. And we are going to use those things in order to construct a society that then produces liberty. That is completely antithetical to Nazism, to Stalinism, to Mussolini's Italy, to the totalitarian regimes of the 20th century. And I think for a long time we've been conflating those two, and it's not correct to conflate those two.
Yeah. Well, people like to talk about the grand experiment that was created between capitalism and communism, and they'll point to either the Berlin Wall or they'll point to a picture of North and South Korea. And they'll say, we ran this 50-year experiment between North and South Korea on what worked better, capitalism and communism, and we can see which is obviously better. We also conducted an experiment between classical liberalism built upon a foundation of Christianity and classical liberalism built upon a foundation of secularism. It was called the French Revolution versus the American Revolution. And the American Revolution was incredibly successful and stable. And the French Revolution had new leaders every couple of years until finally it ended in empire under Napoleon and him grape-shotting the protesters, right? It's this idea that when you pretend that the symptoms of something or the outworkings of something are the thing itself, you fail. These things like property rights and the benefits of freedom of speech and the benefits of all of these things have to be built upon some sort of transcendent moral premise that is true and can sustain them. There has to be this place that we're able to appeal toward. And the problem is the secularists thought, well, it's just truth. And we can arrive at truth through the scientific method and the laws of logic. No, you can arrive at what happened. You can arrive at preference.
You can arrive at a descriptor of reality.
You can arrive at a descriptor of reality. You know what you can't arrive at? What you ought to do.
Yes.
And that's the problem. That is what has been missing from this overly secularized approach. Now, again, people say, oh, Nick, you're a Christian nationalist. If by Christian nationalist, you mean I would love to live in a country where every single human person was absolutely committed to Jesus Christ, yep, I absolutely want that. But here's the catch. As a Christian, I'm not permitted to impose it. I cannot force you to be committed to Christ. Christ gives us the liberty to be able to make some of these decisions. Not all of them. We don't get to decide right or wrong. But we do get to decide what side we want to take.
And we didn't do that at the founding of this country either.
No.
At no point in American history were we converting people by the sword.
No.
But Adams is correct in his analysis. And I think that what a large chunk of the right, people like Michael Knowles or Matt Walsh, have realized is that we aren't a moral and religious people, and we have to get back to that.
Yeah.
And in the process of getting back to that, we have to realize that things have flown off course. I mean, again, you can debate all day long, is it a detour or the destination? But the fact is that we're in a spot right now where we don't want to be.
Yeah.
And if we want to get out of that spot, it's going to require restoring that foundation. You cannot have. I think Michael Knowles was completely right when he was like, liberty requires order.
Yeah.
If you remove the order component, you have chaos and licentiousness.
Yeah.
And that is not liberty. That is anarchy.
Mm-hmm.
And anarchy will devolve into tyranny, which, by the way, is what we were living through until recently. It was the managerial class tyranny. It was the tyranny of the administrative state.
Mm-hmm.
It was the tyranny of progressivism. So we have to get back to reinforcing some of these basic norms. That doesn't mean that you go around and you forcibly convert anybody. Nobody's advocating for that. I'm not even advocating for that.
Yeah.
But what we have to do is we have to realize that we are in a different political era than the one that we were in, say, on September 8th.
Yeah.
Or September 9th. September 9th.
No, and it's about understanding.
Probably
that,
before that, though, to be honest.
No, I mean, what happened on September 10th is there was a big enough shock. And then what happened on September 11th and 12th and 13th was we saw the response to that shock. And that's when a critical mass of people on the right realized they actually hate us.
Yeah.
They actually hate us. And you look at things very differently once you realize they actually hate you. And there's always going to be some people that are, there's always going to be people on the other side that don't hate you, legitimately don't hate you. There's also going to be a lot of other people that are smart enough to know they can't let you know that they hate you. I'm going to give one example of this, and we're going to kind of wrap this up. Where I first realized it was my first 4 years in the General Assembly, we were in the majority. For the first 2 years, it was with 64 seats. And it was amazing how easily I got along with people on the other side of the aisle. My freshman year, there was an incident where there was a hit and run, and I dropped my backpack and I went over to go help the woman that had been hit by a car, and it got in the newspapers. And the next day, a Democrat colleague of mine came over and gave me a backpack to replace the one that I had stolen because somebody stole my backpack in Richmond as I was helping this woman. And so she gave me a backpack. And I remember sitting and having, nice conversations and talking about family. And then when we got down to a one-seat majority, I started to see something changing. Now, there had always been like the comments, racism, bigotry, sex, that had always been there. But then they would no sooner say that on the floor than they would come and sit in your office and have a drink. And it was like, okay, it's hyperbole. It's hyperbole, right? They're getting a little bit carried away in their rhetoric. Hey, it can happen to the best of us. And then we lost power. And now all of a sudden, they didn't need us to get their bills passed. They controlled all the committees. And that's when all of a sudden it was just like overnight, we got treated very, very differently. I started to get treated very, very differently when I got tired of being called, a Nazi and a terrorist because I didn't want to do their gun bans.
Which is very ironic when you think about.
Right. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh. And you might think, okay, Nick, well, is this a fair thing, or were they just upset, or were tensions heightened? I remember one person in particular who I'd always had a nice working relationship with. We would sit there and we would talk to one another, and I would do what Charlie Kirk would do. I remember one time she was sitting next to me and she goes, Nick, I think you're going to I want a rules change for the House of Delegates, which says that you can't have a gun when you're sitting in the gallery. And I said, why? I don't, because we had a rule when we were in charge, which said, look, if you're if you're a law-abiding citizen, you own a firearm, you're allowed to be armed. And you could come watch the Virginia House of Delegates, and you had a concealed carry permit, you can carry concealed. And she said, well, I want to end that. I said, well, I'm not going to support that. And she goes, Nick, you are a Green Beret. You understand that it is very dangerous to have the enemy on the high ground behind you. I said, well, the difference is that I don't consider my constituents my enemy. And she goes, Nick, I didn't mean that. I said, well, you made kind of a broad statement. And she said, do you mean to tell me that your right to the Second Amendment should outweigh my right to feel safe? I said, I don't think you want to use that reasoning. And she goes, why not? I said, okay, so you're saying that you have a right to feel safe. Yes. Then presumably I have a right to feel safe. Well, yes, of course. Okay, good. I only feel safe if everyone's armed. How does the government adjudicate between our right to feel safe without violating the other person's right to feel safe? And she said, she goes, okay, I get what you mean. She goes, Nick, I still think it's a bad idea. I said, that's fine. I said, but can we please not call it a right to feel safe? It's not even possible to codify, right? Because there's no way that the government could protect one person's right to feel safe without automatically violating another person's right to feel safe. So can we at least use it? She said, I get that, Nick. I understand that. And I'm like, man, we had this great conversation. She treated me like crap the moment they took power. I remember there was this little election for a caucus we had. It wasn't even a committee. It was the Military and Veterans Caucus. And I was one of the only people in the Virginia House of Delegates that had actually had combat experience. And I don't mean I went to a combat zone. I mean, I kicked in doors to go get bad guys. And they elected me the House chair. And I remember her looking right at me and going, no. And it was just like, what did I do? What did I do to this woman that made her hate me so much? And then the moment we took power again, the moment we were back in the majority, she walks over to me, Nick, are you going to be nice this session? And I remember looking at her going, do you even see what goes on that floor? Do you even see what happened the moment you guys took power? Do you know how many times we've sat there on the floor and I've listened to your side of the aisle call us the most vile things because we just disagree, because we had a different perspective? When did you ever stand up and say, oh, well, that's too much? And that's when I realized even the people that maybe on some level don't want to see me as their enemy will stand by and do nothing as all of their colleagues do. And that's why I just think we've gotten to this point where it's like, look, I will always do my best to live as much as it is within my power to live in peace. But the other side gets a say, and the other side has decided I'm their enemy. The other side has decided that they're going to celebrate things like this. The other side has decided that they want a country that would, by the definition of what they want, exclude someone like me. I would be forever punished, persecuted, either for my religious beliefs or my desire to not go through life completely disarmed, or my desire to not have my tax dollars go to the butchering of children through all 9 months of pregnancy, or the desire to not have my tax dollars go and actually provide gender reassignment surgery for 16-year-olds, chemical castration medication for 10-year-olds, pornographic materials in public school libraries. And nobody gets to tell me it isn't true, because I've sat there in the legislature as we've debated it, discussed this, shown the evidence. It's true. It's true. It is 100% true. So you show me a world. You show me a world where that is not included in their worldview. Show me a world where the moment the narrative doesn't line up with the truth and they choose the truth over the narrative, and I'll show you a world where we can peacefully coexist. But until then, I'm not the one that declared them my enemy. They repeatedly, over years now, told me I was their enemy. And now I'm just not arguing with them anymore. So, there's one other thing well, actually, I think we'll save it for next episode. Because next episode, we're going to talk about, okay, if this is the new reality, if this is what we mean when we say that everything changed, not only when Charlie was shot, but in the way the left reacted to it. If we can properly categorize how this worldview came about, the tactics that are used, the next question that we have to ask is, now that we've accepted that this is the reality that they want, and that we either have to accept and fight or accept and surrender, if we're going to fight, and I intend to, how do we do it? And that's what we'll talk about next episode. Thank you very much for joining us. Let us know what you thought in the comments. And we hope you'll also join us for the next episode. Also, if you would like to be involved in our pregame and postgame, because the conversation doesn't end here, we actually go into our postgame with our audience. Please check out the link in the description. We'd love for you to join our larger community within Circle, where we debate these issues. We talk about these issues. There's a lot of extra things that go on there. Check out that link in the description. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next episode.